Hi, I'm Christine Herman of Herman's Quality Meat Shop in Newark, Delaware. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about shank meat, or how it turns into an Osso Buco type of recipe. Are you ready? On my block, I have a variety of shank meat. We call it shank because it's the shin of the animal. And I'm going to give you some clues here what I have. This is the shank of a pig, which is a pork shank. And this particular one is lamb. And I think it will be interesting for you to also see the differences in the size of the animal and the color of the animal. And you can see that the pork is a little more pink, a little less dark like beef would be, similar to the veal. And the lamb actually is thinner and smaller and has more of a tendency to look like beef. This big guy here, you can imagine, is from a steer. And this is his actual shank. His is pretty darn beefy and meaty. And what we do with this, and I'm going to show you in the veal portion of the demonstration, is we actually take and do some trimming. And I'm just going to trim that little piece off there because it was bothering me. But anyway, and we clean it up. We take the membrane off, which again I'm going to show you in a minute on the veal. And then we slice it. And we have these beautiful slices that look like this. And we're going to talk about a recipe here in just a minute as we go through and discuss kind of that exact thing. This guy here on my right is from a calf or veal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this outer membrane off ever so carefully, and that will make it a little less chewy for you, the customer, and far more tender and delicious. So depending upon which animal you will be cooking will depend upon your recipe. And I want you to think about something for a minute and think about your own legs and how they support your body. Well, the shank meat, or the shin, as I've mentioned, supports these particular animals, which means they're going to be a little tougher. And we've talked in previous videos about that, and that means that it's more of a slow roast in liquid, just like a pot roast and shoulder roast. So that being said, these recipes are all low and slow. Maybe what you can do is braise the meat first, maybe flour it, and then braise it with a little bit of hot oil, and then give it some deliciousness like tomato sauce, depending upon which particular animal you're cooking. If you're doing beef and veal, typically tomato sauce and maybe some red wine or white wine, either one. And then let it slow cook with some onions, garlic. Tomato sauce is always a nice additive to that. And let it slow cook for an hour or two on top of the stove. This is a stovetop type of recipe in most cases, sometimes a Dutch oven. And then it is served over either mashed potatoes or risotto, possibly rice if you prefer that, or polenta is another option. So you see what I'm removing is some of this fat. I always like to show you what I'm removing, and this silver on the outside, because you can't chew that. You want to be able to get into the meat. And there's a beautiful bone right here, which we all have on our leg. And then when you can see how I've taken this fine membrane off, and I'm very carefully cutting. I like to take that out. And then we will slice this, which I have done previous. Take this little chunk out. Little extra tendon there. You don't want that for sure. So there you have the beginning stages of your veal shank, and then we'll slice it into usually a good 1.5 inch piece, sometimes bigger, thicker rather. And here's another piece, and you're going to get a nice little piece of that bone, which has the marrow in it, which is very delicious and makes it very tender and juicy as well. Some places or restaurants will serve in a way that the bone will be more exposed, and so that when it cooks, this meat will shrink down and you'll have like a longer bone at the top and then the meat at the bottom. That's another presentation. My customers have a tendency to like just these big pieces like this, so that's usually what we do, but we are happy to do whatever our customer chooses. And that is the basic demonstration on the veal Osso Buco. And I wanted to show you that. And the pork is very similar, and what will happen with this is just one shank, and what's going to happen with this is just that the meat will shrink around the bone, and you'll have this nice bone right here, which will also provide a beautiful amount of marrow and flavor in your recipe. Your lamb shank's not quite as meaty because obviously lamb is a much smaller, more delicate piece of meat. And we've done the same thing where we've trimmed off the silver skin, and this is oftentimes served and cooked just as it is versus cutting it, although we can cut it. And some people just like to use the shank meat to make stock or stew with also. It does a beautiful job of that. But I wanted to talk to you also about the beef shank, because what we have found in our store, what most of our customers do with the beef shank is not the same recipe that they would do with the veal, the lamb, or the pork, where they would not necessarily make the Osso Buco, although there are those that do and like a much bigger piece, and we've seen where the same thing happens, where the meat kind of shrinks around the bone and you kind of have like a handle per se. And that's perfectly fine. We're happy to do that. But what most of our customers like us to do is slice these into 1-inch portions like this. And you can see the beautiful marbling. Again, the bone is exposed with the marrow. And they use it for what we call soup meat and bone. And it is just that. This particular piece of meat just melts as you cook it. And it falls off the bone, and then you pull out some of the fat. You'll strain it, and you'll make an amazing pot of beef vegetable soup or stew. Most of our customers, as I said, prefer this for their stew meat because of the amount of marbling and some of that fat. And what I recommend is how I like to make my soup using this meat is cooking it for a couple of hours with your vegetables in it, and then taking the meat out and the bone out and straining it really well. Let it sit, or better yet, let it sit overnight so that you can take the fat off the top and then put everything back in and make your pot of soup. But if you strain it really well or refrigerate it for a little while, that fat will come to the top and you can remove that relatively easily. And that is, again, as I said, how we sell this meat in particular, as what we call soup meat and bone or shin meat. And it's, again, it's amazing because it just kind of just falls apart and it's very tender and juicy. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and this is some helpful information, and we are always happy to accommodate you and your needs and your recipes. There are a lot of recipes out there that we can accommodate, or you can ask your local meat shop for as well. So thank you. This particular kitchen tip has to do with storage containers and what's in your kitchen and what works best for you. I am not here to tell you what you have to have or what you should have. It's strictly up to you and what works. I'm just going to give you some ideas and some thoughts to keep in mind if we all have some kind of plasticware and glassware in our kitchen, and I know that. But it's really important to have, in my opinion, a variety, because you never know what you're going to need, when you're going to need it, for what you're going to need it for. So as we were talking about earlier about making a pot of soup, in all likelihood, you're probably going to have something left over. Hopefully, you're going to make a pot big enough to have left over, and you're going to want to either share it, have it for lunch tomorrow, or freeze it. So what are you going to put it in? Well, you can put it in plastic containers. This might be a perfect size for a child's lunch or for your lunch, for example. And you always want to make sure you have a lid that matches. There is nothing more frustrating than filling up a bunch of containers and not having a lid that matches. So always make sure you match the lid with the container before you fill it. That's another tip right there in itself. Maybe you like round bowls instead. And these, always a good idea. Not only do they nest inside for empty storage, but then they stack nicely in your refrigerator or your freezer. Maybe you say to yourself, I don't want plastic. Even if it's PBA free, maybe you just don't want plastic, you want glass. Well, glass containers are amazing. Always with a lid that either snaps or a plastic lid that just fits snug like that. There's another type of glass, make a little bit fancier. You know, that releases, this one in particular releases the air. Always find what works best for you. My tried and true, my go-tos are always my Corningware. I love my Corningware. I have different sizes, glass lids, plastic lids. You can put plastic over top. You can put foil over top of them. They go from the refrigerator to the freezer to the oven. You always want to have, in my opinion, something that is dishwasher safe, microwavable if you have a microwave, and obviously oven safe as well. So think about what's going to work best in your kitchen, what you're going to store when it's empty, as well as when you want to share. And do you want this back or do you want this back? I always want this back. The plastic containers, I'm okay with sharing and maybe not getting them back if I'm giving them to family or friends. Always makes a nice gift also. But just keep in mind what works best for you in your home and in your kitchen and in your lifestyle. So I hope that was a helpful tip. Thank you. Shank meat is very versatile, depending upon the animal that you're using. Most, as we've discussed in this video, is about the Osso Buco recipe. Or you do a beautiful pot of beef vegetable soup with the beef shanks. I invite you to give it a try. Don't be scared. Don't let the fancy word Osso Buco scare you. It's simple, it's easy, and it's very flavorful. I test you to try it. And please remember to like our page, comment. Please tell me about a recipe that you've made with any one of these meats, and be sure to subscribe to help grow our channel. We appreciate that and your support very much. Thank you. God bless you.